In the middle of a freezing winter, a homeless pregnant woman collapses near a small mountain cabin. The elderly owner finds her, takes her in, and without hesitation offers her the one thing she has left, her home. As the months pass, an unexpected bond forms between the two women, one rebuilding her life and the other rediscovering purpose. When the baby is finally born, what happens next moves the entire town to tears, proving that kindness can rewrite even the hardest stories. But what secret from the old woman's past makes this act of generosity even more extraordinary than anyone could imagine? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eleanor. Whitmore pulled her wool shawl tighter against the bitter mountain wind as she stepped onto her cabin's front porch. At 73, she had learned to read the signs of approaching storms in the way the air felt against her weathered skin, the particular silence that settled over the pine trees before nature unleashed its fury. This morning felt different, though. Something moved in the snowdrift near her mailbox. She squinted through the grey dawn light, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. What she had initially mistaken for a fallen branch was actually a person, curled in the fetal position, nearly buried under fresh snow that had fallen throughout the night. "Dear Lord," Eleanor whispered, her grandmother's prayer instinctively escaping her lips as she hurried down the porch steps. Her worn boots crunching through snow that reached nearly to her knees. The woman was young, maybe 25, with dark hair matted against her pale face. Her lips had taken on a frightening blue tinge, and her breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps. But what stopped Eleanor's heart was the obvious swell of pregnancy beneath the woman's inadequate jacket. "Can you hear me, sweetheart?" Eleanor knelt in the snow, ignoring the cold seeping through her flannel nightgown. She pressed her fingers to the woman's neck, finding a pulse that was weak but steady. "We need to get you inside right now." Eleanor had carried many things in her 73 years, but never a pregnant woman through knee-deep snow. Adrenaline and decades of farm work gave her strength she hadn't known she still possessed. Step by careful step, she managed to get the unconscious woman up the porch steps and through her front door. The warmth of the cabin's interior hit them both like a wall. Eleanor's wood stove had been burning all night, keeping the small space comfortably heated against the mountain winter. She laid the woman on her sofa, quickly gathering every blanket she owned. "Stay with me." "Ah, honey," Eleanor murmured as she worked to remove the woman's wet clothes, replacing them with her own dry flannel pajamas and thick wool socks. The woman's skin was so cold it felt like touching marble. Eleanor's hands moved with practiced efficiency, a muscle memory she hadn't accessed in 40 years, returning as naturally as breathing. She checked for signs of frostbite, monitored the woman's breathing, felt for the baby's movement beneath the stretched skin of her belly. Everything she had learned during her years as a nurse and midwife came flooding back. From her bedroom closet, Eleanor retrieved a wooden box she hadn't opened in decades. Inside, wrapped in faded tissue paper, lay her husband's old military coat. The heavy wool garment had kept Thomas warm through 2 tours of duty, and she had kept it all these years because letting it go felt like losing him all over again. She draped the coat over the unconscious woman, tucking it carefully around her swollen belly. The weight and warmth of the garment seemed to bring color back to the woman's face almost immediately. As Eleanor prepared warm broth in her kitchen, she studied her unexpected guest. The woman's clothes, though wet and worn, were clean. Her fingernails were short but well-maintained. This wasn't someone who had been living rough for long. Whatever circumstances had brought her to Eleanor's doorstep in the middle of a blizzard, they were recent and desperate. The woman's eyes fluttered open just as Eleanor returned with a steaming mug of chicken broth. Fear immediately filled those brown eyes, and she struggled to sit up, her hands instinctively moving to protect her belly. "Easy, sweetheart," Eleanor said gently, setting the mug on her coffee table and raising both hands to show she meant no harm. "You're safe. I found you outside in the snow. You nearly froze to death. I need to go," the woman whispered, her voice hoarse and weak. "I can't stay here." "The storm isn't stopping any time soon," Eleanor replied matter-of-factly. "And in your condition, you're not going anywhere until I'm sure you and that baby are both healthy." The woman's eyes darted around the small cabin, taking in the quilts hanging on the walls, the photographs of people long gone, the general sense of a life lived fully and alone. "You don't understand. I don't have any money. I can't pay you." Eleanor sat down in her rocking chair, the same chair where she had nursed her own daughter 43 years ago. "Did I ask for money?" "No, but then we don't have a problem." Eleanor picked up the mug of broth and held it out. "Now drink this before it gets cold. You're eating for two, and from the looks of you, neither one of you has had a proper meal in quite some time." Maya Rodriguez had never been inside a home that felt so completely at peace with itself. As she sipped the warm broth Eleanor had prepared, she studied the small cabin with the careful attention of someone who had learned that safe spaces were temporary gifts, not permanent promises. The walls were lined with hand-sewn quilts in patterns that spoke of patience and skill passed down through generations. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel crowded with photographs of people who smiled with the easy confidence of those who had never doubted their place in the world. Books filled every available shelf, their spines worn smooth by countless readings. "How long have you lived here?" Maya asked, her voice still rough from the cold that had nearly claimed her life. 43 years come spring," Eleanor replied, settling back into her rocking chair with her own mug of tea. "My husband Thomas and I bought this place right after we married. He passed 15 years ago." Maya noticed the way Eleanor's eyes softened when she mentioned her husband, the way her fingers unconsciously twisted the simple gold band she still wore. Some loves, Maya realized, were strong enough to outlast death itself. "I should leave as soon as the storm passes," Maya said quietly. "I don't want to be a burden." Eleanor's laugh was gentle but firm. "Child, you're 6 months pregnant and nearly died of exposure less than 12 hours ago. You're not going anywhere until that baby is born, healthy, and you're both strong enough to face whatever comes." Next, the certainty in Eleanor's voice both comforted and terrified Maya. She had grown accustomed to people who offered help with conditions attached. Kindness that came with expiration, dates clearly marked. Eleanor's unconditional acceptance felt too good to be real. "You don't even know my name," Maya protested. "Then tell me." "Maya Rodriguez." "Well, Maya Rodriguez, I'm Eleanor Whitmore, and this is your home for as long as you need it to be." Eleanor rose from her chair with the deliberate movements of someone who had learned to accommodate an aging body without surrendering to it. She walked to a cedar chest, tucked beneath the cabin's single window, lifting its heavy lid with reverent care. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that crackled with age, lay baby clothes in soft yellows and greens, tiny sleepers with pearl buttons, hand-knitted blankets in intricate patterns, receiving blankets embroidered with flowers and birds. Each piece had been preserved with the meticulous care of someone who understood their sacred significance. "These were my daughters," Eleanor said softly, lifting a miniature sweater that could have fit in the palm of her hand. "And before that, they were mine." Maya felt tears sting her eyes. The clothes were beautiful, obviously expensive, but more than that, they represented something she had given up hoping for. They represented a family that planned for children, that prepared for their arrival with joy instead of fear. "I can't take these," Maya whispered. "They're too precious. They're meant for babies," Eleanor replied practically. "What good are they doing folded away in a chest? Baby clothes are meant to be worn, not preserved like museum pieces." She pulled out a hand-carved wooden cradle, its surface polished smooth by time and loving care. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with tiny flowers carved into the headboard and gentle curves that spoke of countless hours of patient work. "Thomas made this before our Sarah was born," Eleanor explained, running her fingers along the cradle's edge. "His hands were better with wood than they ever were with words. This was how he told us he loved us." Maya watched Eleanor's face as she spoke about her daughter, noting the past tense and the shadow that crossed her eyes. There was a story there, a painful one. But Maya had learned not to push for information that wasn't freely offered. The small room upstairs would make a perfect nursery. Eleanor continued, seemingly unaware of Maya's observation. Gets the morning sun and it's warm even in winter. We can set up the cradle there, make it ready. Eleanor, Maya began, struggling to find words for the overwhelming gratitude that threatened to choke her. Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. You don't even know me. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. And still holding the tiny sweater, when she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of old pain and new hope. Sometimes we get chances to make things right, she said simply. Sometimes life gives us opportunities to be the person someone needed us to be, even if we can't go back and change what came before. Maya didn't understand what Eleanor meant, but she could hear the truth in her voice, the deep conviction that went beyond mere kindness. Whatever had brought Eleanor to this moment of radical generosity, it was rooted in something more complex than simple charity. Thank you, Maya whispered. The words inadequate for the magnitude of what was being offered. No need for thanks, Eleanor replied. Just rest now. You're going to need your strength for what's coming. The fire crackled softly in the stone fireplace as evening settled over the mountain cabin. Maya sat curled on the sofa, wrapped in one of Eleanor's hand-stitched quilts, watching her host prepare dinner with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had been cooking for herself for many years. Tell me about yourself, Eleanor said, as she stirred a pot of vegetable soup that filled the cabin with the warm scents of carrots and herbs. Where did you come from before you ended up in my snowdrift? Maya's hands instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby had been unusually active since she'd warmed up. Phoenix. I was living with my boyfriend there until 3 weeks ago. What happened 3 weeks ago? He decided he wasn't ready to be a father. Maya's voice carried the flat tone of someone who had rehearsed painful facts until they lost their sting. Actually, he decided he wasn't ready to be a father to my baby. Apparently, he was perfectly ready to be a father to his ex-girlfriend's baby. Eleanor's stirring never paused, but Maya noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. I see, and your family. My parents died in a car accident when I was 16. I've been on my own since then. Maya pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders. I thought I had built something stable with Derek. We lived together for 2 years. I thought he loved me. Sometimes we love people who aren't capable of loving us back the way we deserve, Eleanor said gently. That doesn't make our love wrong. It just makes their inability tragic. There was something in Eleanor's tone that suggested personal experience with such tragedy. Maya studied the older woman's profile as she ladled soup into bowls, noting the careful way she had arranged her life around solitude. What about you? Maya asked. You mentioned a daughter. Eleanor's hands stilled for just a moment before she continued serving. Sarah. She would have been 43 this year. The past tense hung in the air between them like smoke. Maya felt her heart clench with understanding and regret for asking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have. It's all right. Eleanor carried their bowls to the small dining table that sat beneath a window overlooking the snow-covered pines. It was a long time ago, and talking about her keeps her memory alive. They ate in comfortable silence for several minutes before Eleanor spoke again, her voice steady but distant. Sarah was 17 when she got pregnant. This was 1983, and things were different then. Less understanding, less support for young mothers. Eleanor's spoon moved slowly through her soup. Her father and we weren't as compassionate as we should have been. We were worried about appearances, about what people would think. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather outside. She could see where this story was heading, could recognize the weight of regret in Eleanor's careful words. We sent her to stay with my sister in Denver. Told everyone she was taking a semester off to help with my sister's new business. Eleanor's eyes focused on something far beyond the cabin walls. The plan was for her to give the baby up for adoption and come home like nothing had happened. But that's not what happened. No. Eleanor's voice grew quieter. Sarah hemorrhaged during delivery. The baby lived, but Sarah, she died 3 days later from complications they couldn't stop. Maya reached across the table and covered Eleanor's hand with her own. The older woman's fingers were cold, despite the warmth of the cabin. The worst part, Eleanor continued, was that she died believing we were ashamed of her, believing that her pregnancy was something shameful that needed to be hidden away. And the baby, a little girl, Sarah named her Hope. Eleanor's smile was sad but genuine. She was adopted by a wonderful family in Colorado. She's a teacher now, has 3 children of her own. She sends me a Christmas card every year. Maya began to understand the depth of Eleanor's generosity, the profound motivation behind her immediate acceptance of a pregnant stranger. This wasn't simple kindness. This was atonement. Eleanor reached for a framed photograph that sat on the mantelpiece, bringing it back to the table. The picture showed a young woman with Eleanor's intelligent eyes and a smile that radiated confidence and joy. She wore a graduation cap and gown, her arms around a couple who looked like they owned the world. This was taken the day before she told us about the pregnancy, Eleanor said softly. She had just graduated high school, had a scholarship to nursing school. She wanted to be a midwife, help other women through childbirth. Maya studied the photograph, seeing echoes of Eleanor in the young woman's face, but also seeing something else. The same mix of determination and vulnerability that Maya recognized in her own mirror. She looks like she would have been an amazing mother, Maya said. I think so too. And I think she would have wanted me to help you, to make sure your story has a different ending than hers did. Maya felt tears threatening again, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Eleanor's gift. This wasn't charity. This was a chance for redemption, for both of them. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised Maya with its gentle predictability. Eleanor woke each morning at sunrise, moving quietly through the cabin as she prepared coffee and checked the wood stove. Maya would emerge from the small upstairs room to find breakfast waiting, and Eleanor ready to share whatever domestic wisdom the day required. Cooking is about more than following recipes, Eleanor explained as she guided Maya through the preparation of homemade bread. It's about understanding how ingredients work together, how they change under different conditions. Maya's hands were clumsy at first, unused to the patient kneading that bread required, but Eleanor's gentle corrections and steady encouragement gradually built her confidence. The kitchen filled with the yeasty smell of rising dough and the comfortable sounds of 2 women working side by side. My grandmother kept all her recipes in this box, Eleanor said, pulling out a wooden container worn smooth by decades of handling. The box was filled with index cards covered in faded handwriting, some splattered with ingredients from countless cooking sessions. Maya lifted one of the cards, studying the careful script that documented a recipe for apple pie. The margins were filled with notes. Add extra cinnamon in winter. Thomas prefers less sugar. Sarah's favorite for her birthday. These aren't just recipes, Maya observed. They're family history. Every dish tells a story, Eleanor agreed. Food is how we show love, how we mark celebrations, how we comfort each other through difficult times. As Maya's pregnancy progressed, Eleanor insisted on accompanying her to the monthly doctor visits in town. The drive down the mountain took 30 minutes, winding through pine forests and past other isolated cabins whose owners valued privacy and self-sufficiency above convenience. Dr. Harrison, a man in his 60s who had been delivering babies in the valley for most of his career, treated Eleanor with the respectful familiarity reserved for old friends. During Maya's first appointment, his eyebrows rose slightly when Eleanor introduced her as a friend staying with me, but he asked no probing questions. Everything looks good, he told Maya after the examination. Baby's growing well, heartbeat is strong. You're taking good care of yourself. Maya glanced at Eleanor, who sat quietly in the corner chair, her hands folded in her lap. Eleanor's taking good care of me. Dr. Harrison's gaze moved between the two women, and Maya could see him putting together pieces of a story he wouldn't voice aloud. Small towns had their own codes of discretion, their own ways of protecting people who needed protection. "Mrs. Whitmore has always been good at taking care of people," he said simply. "You're in excellent hands." On the drive home, Maya noticed how other residents of the town acknowledged Eleanor. The grocery store clerk who saved her the best cuts of meat, the pharmacy owner who asked about her arthritis medication, the woman at the post office who always had a cheerful word about the weather. These weren't the interactions of a hermit. These were the careful courtesies extended to someone who had earned respect through years of quiet dignity. "People really care about you here," Maya observed as they loaded groceries into Eleanor's old truck. "Small communities remember kindness," Eleanor replied, "and they remember tragedy. Sometimes that memory can be a burden, but sometimes it's a blessing." They drove home through a landscape that was beginning to show the first subtle signs of spring's approach. The snow still lay thick on the ground, but the quality of light was changing, becoming softer and more golden as the days slowly lengthened. Back at the cabin, Eleanor pulled out yarn and knitting needles, her fingers moving with practice ease as she began work on a tiny sweater in soft yellow wool. "I haven't knitted baby clothes in 43 years, she admitted. "But some skills come back when you need them." Maya watched the delicate stitches take shape, marveling at the patience required to create something so small and perfect. "Will you teach me?" "Of course." Every mother should know how to knit for her children. The word mother still felt strange to Maya, like a role she was auditioning for but hadn't been cast in yet. Her pregnancy had begun as an accident, a complication that derailed her carefully planned life. But here, surrounded by Eleanor's quiet confidence and gentle preparations, she was beginning to imagine herself as someone who could nurture and protect another human being. "Eleanor," Maya said as she awkwardly manipulated the knitting needles, dropping more stitches than she managed to keep. "Thank you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." Eleanor's hands never paused in their rhythmic work. Sometimes we need someone else's eyes to show us who we really are, and sometimes helping someone else become who they're meant to be helps us remember who we used to be. The fire settled in the grate, sending sparks up the chimney and casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. Outside, the wind moved through the pine trees, with the soft whisper of changing seasons and new possibilities. The morning Maya entered her third trimester, Eleanor disappeared into the cabin's small storage room and emerged carrying a cedar chest that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. She set it carefully on the living room floor, her movements reverent and deliberate. "I've been saving these for the right time," Eleanor said softly, running her weathered hands over the chest's polished surface. "I think that time has come." Maya lowered herself onto the sofa, her growing belly making even simple movements require planning and patience. She watched as Eleanor lifted the heavy lid, revealing layers of tissue paper that crackled with age. Inside lay the most beautiful collection of baby clothes Maya had ever seen. Not just functional garments, but tiny works of art, created with infinite care and attention to detail. Hand-smock dresses with pearl buttons no bigger than pinheads, knitted sweaters with intricate cable patterns, receiving blankets edged with delicate lace that must have taken months to complete. "These were Sarah's," Eleanor explained, lifting each piece with the tenderness usually reserved for handling butterfly wings. "I made most of them myself during the months before she was born. Back then, I had so much hope, so many dreams about the kind of mother I would be." Maya watched Eleanor's face as she unfolded a christening gown that was clearly an heirloom, its white silk still pristine despite its age. The detail work was extraordinary. Tiny flowers embroidered by hand, seed pearls sewn with stitches so small they were barely visible. "Eleanor, these are museum pieces." "I can't let my baby wear them." "Why not?" Eleanor's voice carried genuine surprise. "Baby clothes are meant to be worn, not preserved. What good are they doing folded away in a chest?" She continued unpacking the treasures, each item more beautiful than the last. Booties so small they could fit in a teaspoon, caps with ribbons that tied under tiny chins, sleepers with feet shaped like little animals. Everything spoke of a mother's love and anticipation, of months spent preparing for a life that would be cherished and celebrated. At the bottom of the chest, wrapped in a hand-quilted blanket, lay the most precious item of all. A wooden music box, its surface carved with dancing bears and singing birds. Eleanor wound the key with careful fingers, and the gentle melody of Brahms' lullaby filled the cabin. "Thomas made this," she said, her voice thick with memory. He wasn't musical, could barely carry a tune, but he wanted Sarah to have something that would sing her to sleep, even when we weren't there. Maya felt tears stinging her eyes as she listened to the sweet, simple melody. The music box represented everything she had never dared to hope for. A father who would create beautiful things for his child. Parents who planned and prepared and dreamed together about the life they were bringing into the world. "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered. "These things are irreplaceable. That's exactly why they need to be used," Eleanor replied firmly. "Sarah would want them to comfort another baby, to be part of another child's story. Keeping them locked away isn't honoring her memory. It's wasting it." They spent the rest of the morning organizing the tiny clothes, sorting them by size and season. Eleanor's knowledge of babies was evident in every detail. She understood growth spurts and seasonal needs, the practical considerations that new mothers often learned through trial and error. Newborns go through 6 to 8 outfits a day. Eleanor explained as she folded receiving blankets with practiced efficiency. They have no respect for careful planning or favorite clothes. You need to be prepared for constant changes. Maya tried to imagine herself managing such chaos, tried to picture herself as someone competent enough to keep a tiny human being safe and comfortable. The responsibility felt enormous, terrifying in its scope and permanence. "What if I don't know what I'm doing?" she asked quietly. "What if I'm not good at this?" Eleanor paused in her folding and looked directly at Maya, her grey eyes serious but kind. "Do you think any of us knew what we were doing when we started? Motherhood isn't something you learn from books or classes. It's something you figure out one day at a time, one decision at a time." She picked up the music box again, winding it to hear the lullaby once more. "The important thing isn't knowing everything. The important thing is caring enough to try, and loving enough to keep trying even when you make mistakes." As the afternoon sun slanted through the cabin windows, casting everything in golden light, Maya began to believe that maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe love was enough to begin with. Maybe everything else could be learned along the way. The baby kicked strongly, as if responding to the music or perhaps to the energy of preparation surrounding its arrival. Maya placed her hands on her belly, feeling the solid reality of the life growing inside her. The life that would soon wear these beautiful clothes and listen to this gentle lullaby. The first time Maya accompanied Eleanor to the weekly farmers' market in town, she could feel the weight of curious stares following their every movement. Eleanor navigated the small crowd with the confidence of someone who had been part of this community for decades. But Maya noticed how conversations paused when they approached, how eyes lingered on her obviously pregnant form. "Eleanor Whitmore," called out Mrs. Patterson, the woman who ran the local bakery. "Haven't seen you in town much lately." "Been keeping busy," Eleanor replied pleasantly. Her arm linked protectively through Maya's. "Margaret, I'd like you to meet my friend Maya. She's staying with me for a while." Mrs. Patterson's gaze swept over Maya with the practiced assessment of someone who had spent a lifetime cataloguing other people's business. Her smile was polite but cool, the kind reserved for situations that required courtesy without warmth. "How nice," she said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but nice. "And how long will you be visiting?" "As long as she needs to," Eleanor answered before Maya could speak, her voice carrying a gentle but unmistakable warning against further questions. As they moved through the market, Maya became increasingly aware of the whispered conversations that followed in their wake. The town was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and a pregnant stranger living with the reclusive Eleanor Whitmore was clearly the most interesting thing to happen in months. At the newspaper stand, Maya caught sight of a yellowed clipping taped to the inside of the display case. The headline read, "Local teen dies in childbirth complications," and below it was a photograph of a young woman Maya recognized immediately. Sarah Whitmore, 17 years old, smiling at the camera with the radiant confidence of someone who believed the world held nothing but possibility. The article was brief, respectful in the way small-town newspapers handled local tragedies. It mentioned Sarah's academic achievements, her plans to study nursing, her death from complications following the birth of a daughter. What it didn't mention was the shame and secrecy that had surrounded her pregnancy, the family's decision to send her away rather than face their community's judgment. "Terrible thing, that was," said a voice beside her. Maya turned to find an elderly man with kind eyes and weathered hands studying the same clipping. Sarah was a good girl, smart as a whip, always helping out at the church social events. "You knew her?" "Knew the whole family. Thomas and Eleanor were good people, but they made a mistake with that girl. Should have kept her close, supported her instead of sending her away." He shook his head sadly. "Sometimes doing what seems right isn't the same as doing what's actually right." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. She was beginning to understand the full weight of what Eleanor was risking by taking her in, by refusing to hide her pregnancy or pretend it was something shameful. That evening, as they sat by the fire, sharing a dinner of fresh bread and soup, Maya brought up what she had witnessed in town. "People are talking about us," she said quietly. "People always talk," Eleanor replied, her tone unconcerned. "It's what they do when their own lives aren't interesting enough to hold their attention." But some of them seemed disapproving. Eleanor set down her spoon and looked directly at Maya. "Let me tell you something about disapproval. Most of the time, it says more about the people doing the disapproving than it does about the people being judged." She rose from the table and retrieved a photo album from the bookshelf, settling back into her chair with the careful movements of someone whose joints reminded her daily of accumulated years. "I spent 43 years worrying about what people thought," Eleanor said, opening the album to a page filled with pictures of Sarah at various ages. "I let their opinions guide my decisions about my own daughter. I chose their comfort over her needs, their approval over her happiness." Maya studied the photographs, seeing Sarah grow from a chubby toddler to a beautiful teenager full of promise and joy. In every picture, she looked loved and confident, surrounded by parents who clearly adored her. "I won't make that mistake again," Eleanor continued, her voice firm with resolve. "I won't let other people's narrow thinking determine how I live my life, or how I treat someone who needs help." As if summoned by their conversation, Eleanor's phone rang. She answered with her usual calm demeanor, but Maya could see tension creeping into her posture as she listened to whoever was speaking. "I appreciate your concern, Pastor Williams," Eleanor said finally, "but I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions about who stays in my home." Maya could hear the rumble of a male voice through the phone, though she couldn't make out the words. Whatever he was saying, it was clear he disapproved of the current situation. "No, I don't think it would be appropriate for you to come by and assess the situation," Eleanor continued, her voice growing cooler. "Maya is not a problem that needs solving. She's a young woman who needs support, and I'm providing it." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Eleanor maintaining her polite but immovable position. When she finally hung up, she looked tired in a way Maya hadn't seen before. "Some people," Eleanor said with a sigh, "think kindness should come with conditions attached." On a quiet evening in late February, as snow continued to fall outside the cabin windows, Eleanor pulled out a leather-bound journal that Maya had never seen before. The cover was worn smooth by handling, and the pages inside were filled with elegant handwriting in fading blue ink. This was Sarah's diary, Eleanor said softly, settling into her rocking chair with the precious book cradled in her lap. I found it after she died. I've never been able to bring myself to read it all the way through. Maya looked up from the baby blanket she was attempting to knit, her fingers still clumsy with the unfamiliar needles. Are you sure you want to share that with me? I think it's time, Eleanor replied, opening to a page marked with a pressed flower. I think Sarah would want her story to help someone else. The entry was dated 6 months before Sarah's death, written in the careful cursive of a 17-year-old trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly become much more complicated. I told them today, Eleanor read aloud, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Mom cried, and Dad got that look he gets when he's trying to solve a problem that doesn't have a good solution. They keep talking about options and timing and what people will think. I don't think they understand that I've already made my choice. I want this baby. I want to be a mother. Maya felt her own eyes welling with tears as she listened to the voice of a young woman who had faced the same fears and hopes she was experiencing. Now, Eleanor turned the page and continued reading. I've been thinking about names. If it's a girl, I want to call her Hope. Mom says that's too sentimental, but I think hope is exactly what this baby represents. A chance to create something beautiful, even when everyone else sees only problems. She named her Hope, Maya whispered. The baby who was adopted. Yes, Sarah got her way on that at least. Eleanor's voice carried a mixture of pride and regret. She was always strong-willed, always determined to do what she thought was right. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thoughts of choices made and paths taken. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, and outside, the wind moved through the pine trees with the whispered promise of spring still months away. Eleanor, Maya said finally, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had supported Sarah's decision to keep the baby? If you had helped her instead of sending her away? Eleanor closed the diary and held it against her chest, as if trying to feel some connection to the daughter she had lost. Every day for 43 years, every single day, and now, with me, now I get a chance to do things differently. I get a chance to be the person Sarah needed me to be. Eleanor's voice grew stronger, more certain. I can't change what happened to her, but I can make sure her story helps write a better ending for you. Maya set down her knitting and moved to sit on the floor beside Eleanor's chair, leaning against the older woman's legs in a gesture that spoke of the deep affection that had grown between them. I need you to know something, Maya said quietly. I've never had a mother figure in my life. My own mother died when I was too young to really know her, and I've spent most of my adult life convincing myself I didn't need that kind of connection. Eleanor's hand settled gently on Maya's hair, stroking it with the tender touch of someone who had been denied the chance to comfort her own child. But being here with you, Maya continued, learning from you, watching how you care for people, it's shown me what I've been missing. What my baby deserves to have, your baby will have it, Eleanor said firmly. Love, support, someone who believes in their potential even when they can't see it themselves. Would you consider being like a grandmother to this baby? Maya's voice was hesitant, afraid to ask for something so precious. I know it's a lot to ask, and I know we're not really family, but... Oh, sweetheart, Eleanor interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. We became family the moment I brought you into this house. Blood doesn't make a family. Choice does. Love does. Commitment does. Maya felt tears streaming down her cheeks as Eleanor continued. I would be honored to be this baby's grandmother. More than honored. It would give my life a purpose I thought I'd lost forever. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the mountain in pristine white. Inside the warm cabin, two women who had found each other across the gap of generations and circumstances continued to build something neither had expected to find. A family created not by accident of birth, but by deliberate choice, and unconditional love. Sarah's diary lay open on Eleanor's lap, its pages filled with the dreams and hopes of a young woman who had faced an uncertain future with courage and determination. In many ways, her story was finally getting the ending she had always wanted. Maya woke in the middle of the night to sharp pain radiating across her lower back and abdomen. At first, she tried to convince herself it was normal pregnancy discomfort, the kind of ache that came from carrying extra weight and sleeping in unfamiliar positions. But as she shifted in bed, trying to find relief, the pain intensified with a suddenness that made her gasp. "Eleanor!" she called out, her voice tight with fear and pain. "Something's wrong." Eleanor appeared in the doorway within seconds, fully alert despite being awakened from deep sleep. She moved with the swift efficiency of someone whose body remembered crisis management even after decades away from professional nursing. "Tell me what you're feeling," Eleanor said, switching on the bedside lamp and sitting on the edge of Maya's bed. "Pain, sharp pain across my back and stomach. And I think I might be bleeding." Eleanor's face remained calm, but Maya could see the quick calculation happening behind her eyes. At 34 weeks, the baby was developed enough to survive outside the womb, but every additional week in utero was crucial for healthy development. "We need to get you to the hospital," Eleanor said, already moving toward the closet to retrieve warm clothes. Right now, the drive down the mountain in the middle of a March snowstorm was the longest 30 minutes of Maya's life. Eleanor drove with steady hands and complete focus, her old truck navigating the winding roads with practiced ease despite the slick conditions. Between contractions, Maya found herself studying Eleanor's profile, marveling at the transformation from gentle companion to competent medical professional. "How do you know what to do?" Maya asked through gritted teeth as another wave of pain swept over her. "Some knowledge never leaves you," Eleanor replied, her voice steady and reassuring. "I was a nurse for 15 years before I became a mother. Emergency situations have their own rhythm, their own requirements. At the hospital, Dr. Harrison took one look at Maya's condition and immediately ordered tests and monitoring. Eleanor stayed by her side throughout the examination, translating medical terminology and offering quiet reassurance when the doctors spoke in the clipped, efficient language of people managing a crisis. "The good news," Dr. Harrison explained after reviewing the test results, "is that the baby appears to be healthy and the bleeding has stopped. The bad news is that you're showing signs of preterm labor, and we need to take measures to slow it down." Maya felt her world tilt slightly. "What does that mean?" "Complete bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. No physical activity beyond absolutely necessary movement. And close monitoring to make sure we catch any changes immediately." Eleanor squeezed Maya's hand gently. "We can manage that." Dr. Harrison looked between the two women with the careful attention of someone trying to assess a complex situation. "Mrs. Rodriguez will need constant supervision, someone who can recognize warning signs and respond appropriately if her condition changes. I'll be staying with her," Eleanor said simply. "I have medical training, and I understand what to watch for." "Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Harrison said carefully, "that's a significant responsibility. Are you sure you're prepared for what that might involve?" Eleanor's answer came without hesitation. "Doctor, I've been preparing for this responsibility my entire life." They returned to the cabin with a bag full of medications and detailed instructions for managing high-risk pregnancy. Eleanor transformed the living room into a comfortable space where Maya could rest while remaining part of the household's daily activities. She moved the television closer to the sofa, arranged books and magazines within easy reach, and positioned the knitting basket so Maya could continue working on baby projects without straining. Most importantly, Eleanor retrieved a small leather bag from the storage room, its contents clearly organized and well-maintained, despite years of disuse. Inside were medical instruments, blood pressure cuff, stethoscope, and other tools that spoke of professional competence and careful preparation. You kept your medical supplies, Maya observed, as Eleanor checked her blood pressure with practiced efficiency. A nurse never really stops being a nurse, Eleanor replied, recording the readings in a notebook she had designated for tracking Maya's condition. The knowledge becomes part of who you are, even when you're not actively using it. Over the following days, Maya began to understand the depth of Eleanor's medical background. She checked vital signs with the precision of someone who had done it thousands of times, recognized subtle changes in symptoms before Maya was even aware of them, and maintained detailed records that would have impressed any hospital staff. "Why did you stop?" Maya asked one afternoon as Eleanor prepared medications with careful attention to timing and dosage. "You're clearly gifted at this." Eleanor paused in her preparations, her hands still for a moment. "After Sarah died, I couldn't bear to help other people's babies come into the world safely when I had failed my own daughter so completely." "But you didn't fail her medically." "No, but I failed her in other ways that mattered more." Eleanor's voice carried the weight of old grief and newer understanding. Sometimes the most important healing isn't physical. Sometimes it's emotional, spiritual. Sometimes it's about creating space for someone to become who they're meant to be. Maya reached for Eleanor's hand, squeezing it gently. "You're giving me that space now." "Yes," Eleanor replied, her voice soft but certain. "And this time, I'm going to get it right." While Eleanor was outside splitting firewood, Maya found herself restless, despite the strict bed rest orders. Her eyes wandered around the living room, taking in details she had never noticed during her months of recovery and preparation. High on a bookshelf, partially hidden behind a collection of gardening manuals, she spotted the corner of what looked like a diploma or certificate, curiosity overcoming caution. Maya carefully maneuvered herself off the sofa and reached for the frame. What she discovered made her sink back onto the cushions in amazement. Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, Certified Nurse Midwife, State of Colorado, 1967. Below the official certification were several other documents, advanced training certificates in emergency obstetrics, neonatal care, and high-risk pregnancy management. Letters of commendation from hospital administrators. A photograph of a young Eleanor in crisp white uniform, standing with a group of other medical professionals outside what appeared to be a maternity ward. Maya was still staring at the documents when Eleanor returned, stamping snow off her boots and unwrapping the thick scarf that protected her from the mountain cold. "You weren't supposed to be moving around," Eleanor said gently. But her tone carried more concern than reproach. "Eleanor," Maya said, holding up the certificate with trembling hands. "You were a midwife." Eleanor's expression shifted, moving through surprise, resignation, and finally a kind of relief. She hung up her coat with deliberate care before settling into her rocking chair, her movements suggesting someone who had been carrying a weight and was finally ready to set it down. "For 15 years, Eleanor confirmed quietly. "Before Sarah was born and for a few years after, but you told me you were a nurse. You never mentioned that you specialized in delivering babies." Eleanor looked out the window at the snow-covered pines, her fingers absently working the edge of her sweater. "After what happened to Sarah, I couldn't bear to continue. How could I help other women safely deliver their babies when I had failed my own daughter so completely?" Maya studied the photograph more closely, seeing in young Eleanor's face the same gentle confidence she had come to depend on, but also something else: joy, purpose, the unmistakable expression of someone who had found their calling in life. "How many babies did you deliver?" Maya asked softly. 237. The number came without hesitation, as if Eleanor had kept count of each precious life she had helped bring into the world. From premature twins who weighed less than 3 pounds each, to a 10-pound boy whose mother was convinced he would never arrive. "And you just stopped? After Sarah?" Eleanor's hands stilled in her lap. "I delivered one more baby after Sarah died. A little girl whose mother had complications similar to Sarah's. When I managed to save both of them, I broke down completely in the delivery room. I realized I couldn't trust myself anymore. Every delivery would remind me of my failure. Maya felt pieces of a complex puzzle falling into place. Eleanor's immediate knowledge of pregnancy symptoms, her calm competence during the emergency, her well-maintained medical supplies, her detailed understanding of what Maya's body was experiencing. Eleanor, you didn't fail Sarah medically. Dr. Harrison told me that hemorrhaging during childbirth was much more dangerous 40 years ago. The medical technology, the blood banking, the emergency procedures, they weren't what they are now. I know that intellectually, Eleanor replied. But knowledge and feelings don't always align. I spent 43 years believing that if I had been a better midwife, a more attentive mother, somehow I could have prevented what happened. Maya carefully moved from the sofa to sit on the floor beside Eleanor's chair, the same position that had become their customary arrangement during evening conversations. What changed? What made you willing to help me? Eleanor's hand found Maya's hair, stroking it with the tender gesture that had become as natural as breathing. You did. The night I found you in the snow, my instincts took over before my fears could stop me. For the first time in 4 decades, I acted like the midwife I used to be, instead of the woman haunted by tragedy. And it felt right. It felt like coming home to myself. Eleanor's voice grew stronger, more certain. Taking care of you, preparing for this baby's arrival, it's reminded me that my calling wasn't something I lost. It was something I abandoned out of fear. Maya looked again at the certificate, at the evidence of Eleanor's expertise and dedication. Will you deliver my baby? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with significance that went far beyond practical considerations. Maya was asking Eleanor to return fully to her abandoned identity, to trust her skills and judgment in the most crucial moment possible. Are you sure? Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The hospital has all the modern equipment, all the safety measures. I'm sure. You're the person I trust most in the world. You're the one who's been taking care of us all along. Maya squeezed Eleanor's hand gently. Besides, if something goes wrong, we're only 30 minutes from the hospital. But I have a feeling everything is going to be exactly as it should be. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. But for the first time since Maya had known her, they seemed to be tears of healing rather than grief. With Maya's due date approaching and her request for Eleanor to serve as midwife, the cabin transformed into something resembling a small birthing center. Eleanor's decades-dormant professional instincts awakened with remarkable clarity, and she began preparations with the methodical thoroughness that had once made her one of the most respected midwives in Colorado. From the cedar chest in her bedroom, Eleanor retrieved a quilt that Maya had never seen before. Unlike the other quilts in the cabin, this one was clearly special, a masterpiece of intricate stitching in soft blues and whites, with a pattern of interlocking circles that seemed to represent the eternal cycle of life and renewal. My grandmother made this for me when I was born, Eleanor explained, as she spread the quilt carefully across the bed in the upstairs room. Her grandmother made one just like it for her. It's been part of every birth in my family for 5 generations. Maya ran her fingers along the delicate stitching, marveling at the hours of love and skill that had gone into its creation. Are you sure you want me to use it? What if something happens to it? Quilts are meant to be used for important moments, Eleanor replied firmly. And what could be more important than welcoming a new life into the world? Eleanor's medical preparations were equally thorough. She sterilized her instruments with the precision of someone who understood that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. Her leather medical bag, unused for 4 decades, yielded supplies that had been maintained in perfect condition despite their age. Some of these tools belonged to the midwife who trained me, Eleanor explained as she arranged clamps and scissors on a clean towel. She always said that instruments were sacred things, that they deserved the same respect as the lives they helped protect. Maya watched Eleanor work, seeing in her movements the return of professional competence that had never truly disappeared. The gentle woman who had rescued her from the snow was still present. But now she was joined by the skilled medical professional who had once been trusted with the most precious moments in people's lives. "Are you nervous?" Maya asked, as Eleanor checked and rechecked her supplies. Terrified, Eleanor admitted with surprising honesty. "But it's good terror, the kind that keeps you sharp, that reminds you how important what you're doing really is." As part of her preparation, Eleanor reached out to Dr. Harrison, explaining the situation and requesting his support as backup in case complications arose. His response was both professional and personal. "Eleanor, I was a resident when you were practicing," he told her during their phone conversation. "I learned more from watching you work than I did from most of my professors. If Maya wants you as her midwife, she couldn't ask for better care." Eleanor also began sharing stories from her years of practice, not just the technical aspects, but the emotional richness of being present for families during their most vulnerable and joyful moments. "Every birth is different," she told Maya one evening as they sat by the fire, Eleanor's hands busy with final preparations for the baby's arrival. Some babies arrive quickly, as if they're eager to see the world. Others take their time, as if they want to be absolutely sure they're ready. "What kind of baby do you think this one will be?" Eleanor placed her hand gently on Maya's belly, feeling the strong movements of a child who seemed healthy and active. "I think this baby knows exactly when the time is right. I think this baby has been waiting for the perfect moment to join our family." The word family still filled Maya with wonder. 6 months ago, she'd been alone and desperate, convinced that her pregnancy was a mistake that would define the rest of her life in negative terms. Now, surrounded by Eleanor's love and care, she understood that this baby was not an accident, but a gift that had brought her to exactly where she needed to be. "Eleanor," Maya said quietly, "what if I'm not good at this? What if I don't know how to be a mother?" Eleanor set down her knitting and looked directly at Maya, her grey eyes serious but warm. "Do you love this baby?" "More than I ever thought possible." "Then you already know the most important thing. Everything else can be learned, but love is the foundation that makes all the learning possible." Outside, spring was finally beginning to assert itself over the mountain winter. The snow still lay thick on the ground, but the days were growing longer, and there was something in the quality of light that promised warmer weather ahead. Inside the cabin, 2 women continued their preparations for a moment that would change everything. "Sarah would have loved you," Eleanor said suddenly, her voice soft with memory and affection. "She would have been excited to have a little one in the family again. Someone to spoil and teach and love." Maya felt the baby move strongly, as if responding to the mention of the aunt she would never meet, but whose presence seemed to bless this entire experience. "Do you think she knows? Somehow?" "I think love doesn't end with death," Eleanor replied. "I think Sarah's love is part of what brought you to me, part of what's making this whole beautiful story possible." Maya's labor began at dawn, on a morning when the mountain snow was finally showing signs of spring's approach. She woke to the familiar sensation of contractions, but these were different from the false alarms she had experienced over the past few weeks. These had a rhythm and intensity that spoke of genuine progress, of a baby who had decided it was time to enter the world. "Eleanor," she called softly, not wanting to cause unnecessary alarm, but needing the comfort of her presence. Eleanor appeared within moments, fully dressed despite the early hour. Her movements were calm but purposeful, and Maya could see the professional midwife emerging to take charge of the situation. "How long have you been having contractions?" Eleanor asked, settling beside Maya on the bed and checking her watch. "About an hour. They're getting stronger and closer together." Eleanor's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking Maya's pulse and breathing, timing the contractions with the precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Her touch was gentle but confident, reassuring Maya that she was in capable hands. "This is it," Eleanor said with quiet satisfaction. "Your baby has decided today is the day." They moved through the early stages of labor with the rhythm Eleanor had established during their months together. She prepared warm compresses for Maya's back, adjusted pillows for comfort, and maintained a careful record of progression that would have impressed any hospital staff. Eleanor's medical bag sat open on the dresser, its contents organized with military precision. Sterilized instruments gleamed in the morning light, and clean towels were stacked within easy reach. Everything spoke of preparation and competence, of a professional who understood that successful outcomes required attention to countless small details. "Tell me about your first delivery," Maya requested during a pause between contractions, seeking distraction from the increasing intensity of her labor. Eleanor's face softened with memory as she continued her preparations. A farm family outside Denver. The mother was barely 18 and her husband was 20. They were so young, so scared, but so determined to do right by their baby. She paused to check Maya's progress, her hands gentle but thorough. The baby was breech, which meant everything had to be done carefully and precisely. But when that little boy finally arrived, safe and healthy, and I placed him in his mother's arms, there's no feeling in the world like knowing you've helped bring a life safely into existence. As Maya's labor progressed, Eleanor's professional instincts took complete control. She moved between encouragement and medical assessment with seamless efficiency, monitoring both mother and baby with the expertise that had once made her legendary among her colleagues. "I can see the head," Eleanor announced during one of Maya's pushing efforts, her voice filled with excitement and professional satisfaction. "Your baby has beautiful dark hair, just like yours." Maya felt a surge of energy that had nothing to do with physical strength and everything to do with the knowledge that she was about to meet the child she had been carrying and loving for 9 months. Eleanor's steady presence and quiet confidence made everything feel possible. Even in the midst of the most challenging physical experience of her life. "One more push," Eleanor encouraged, her hands positioned to guide the baby safely into the world. "I can see the shoulders. Your baby is almost here." With a final tremendous effort that seemed to draw on strength Maya didn't know she possessed, she felt the baby slip free into Eleanor's waiting hands. The room filled with the sound of a healthy cry, strong and indignant and absolutely perfect. "It's a girl," Eleanor announced, her voice thick with emotion as she lifted the baby for Maya to see. A beautiful, perfect little girl. Maya's first sight of her daughter was through tears of exhaustion and overwhelming joy. The baby was smaller than she had expected, but clearly healthy, with a full head of dark hair and skin that glowed with the pink flush of excellent circulation. Eleanor worked with practiced efficiency, clearing the baby's airway and checking vital signs, while maintaining a running commentary that reassured Maya that everything was proceeding exactly as it should. Her movements were confident and sure, those of a professional who had never truly forgotten her calling. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong heartbeat, excellent color, Eleanor reported as she wrapped the baby in one of the soft blankets they had prepared. "She's absolutely perfect." When Eleanor finally placed the baby in Maya's arms, the moment felt like the completion of a circle that had begun the night Maya collapsed in the snow outside this very cabin. The child looked up at her with dark eyes that seemed surprisingly alert and aware, as if she understood the significance of this moment. "Hello, little one," Maya whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "I'm your mama." Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed watching the first meeting between mother and daughter, with tears streaming down her cheeks. After 43 years of carrying the weight of professional failure and personal grief, she had successfully delivered a healthy baby and helped create the family she had always dreamed of being part of. "She's beautiful," Eleanor said softly. "Absolutely beautiful." The first week with baby Hope was a revelation in exhaustion and joy that Maya had never imagined possible. The name had come to her without hesitation as she held her daughter for the first time, remembering Sarah's diary entry about wanting to name her own baby Hope. It felt like honoring both the past and the future in a single. Perfect word. Eleanor moved through the newborn days with the natural grace of someone who had been born to nurture. She seemed to anticipate Hope's needs before Maya even recognized them, appearing with warm bottles when the baby showed early hunger cues, suggesting position changes when Maya struggled with nursing, offering to take the night shift with the gentle authority of someone who understood that new mothers needed rest to heal properly. "How do you know all this?" Maya asked one morning as Eleanor efficiently changed Hope's diaper while maintaining a steady stream of soft conversation with the baby. "Some knowledge stays in your bones," Eleanor replied, lifting Hope to her shoulder and patting her back with practiced rhythm. "And some babies are just easy to love." Maya watched Eleanor with her daughter and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. The older woman's face had transformed over the past week, losing years of carefully held sadness and replacing it with the radiant joy of someone who had found unexpected purpose. On Hope's 7th day of life, Eleanor made a suggestion that surprised Maya with its formality. "I think we should make this official," Eleanor said as they sat in the living room. Hope sleeping peacefully in the wooden cradle Thomas had carved so many years ago. "Make what official?" Eleanor pulled out papers she had been working on at the kitchen table for the past few days. "I want to legally establish myself as Hope's grandmother, not just emotionally but in the eyes of the law. Emergency contact, medical decisions if anything ever happens to you, inheritance rights, all of it." Maya felt tears welling up as she looked at the carefully prepared documents. "Eleanor, are you sure? That's a tremendous responsibility. It's the responsibility I should have taken with Sarah, the commitment I should have made to support her no matter what anyone else thought." Eleanor's voice was steady but filled with emotion. "I won't make that mistake again." They spent the afternoon working through the legal arrangements with a family lawyer Eleanor had contacted, establishing guardianship provisions and updating wills to reflect their new family structure. The birth certificate, when it arrived a few days later, listed Eleanor Whitmore as Hope's grandmother in the space reserved for family information. "There," Eleanor said with satisfaction as she filed the official documents. "Now no one can question where Hope belongs or who has the right to love her." The transformation in Eleanor over those first weeks was remarkable to witness. She had always been gentle and caring, but now she moved with renewed energy and purpose. Her step was lighter, her smile came more easily, and she seemed to have shed the weight of old grief that had shaped her solitary existence for so many years. "You know what this means, don't you?" Maya said one evening as they sat by the fire, Hope nursing contentedly while Eleanor worked on a new knitting project. "What? You're going to have to come out of hiding. Grandmothers don't get to be hermits. They have to show off their grandchildren to anyone who will listen." Eleanor laughed, a sound that had become more frequent and more joyful since Hope's arrival. "I suppose I am going to have to start going to town more often. Can't have people thinking Hope doesn't have a proper grandmother who brags about her accomplishments." What accomplishments? "She's 8 days old. She has excellent lung capacity, superior hand-eye coordination, and the most beautiful smile in the state of Colorado," Eleanor listed with mock seriousness. "Those are definitely accomplishments worth bragging about." Maya couldn't remember the last time she had felt so completely happy. Not just content or satisfied, but genuinely deeply happy in a way that seemed to radiate from the center of her being outward. Hope was healthy and thriving. Eleanor had found new purpose and joy, and their unconventional family felt more real and solid than any traditional arrangement Maya had ever experienced. "Eleanor," Maya said softly, not wanting to wake the baby, but needing to express the gratitude that filled her heart. "Thank you for saving us, both of us." "Sweetheart," Eleanor replied, looking up from her knitting with eyes that sparkled with love and contentment. "You saved me first. You gave me the chance to be the person I was always meant to be." Outside, spring was asserting itself more boldly each day. The snow was melting in earnest now, revealing the green shoots of plants that had waited patiently through the long winter for their chance to grow. Inside the warm cabin, 3 generations of women were writing a new chapter in a story that had begun with tragedy, but was finding its way to joy through the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to love without conditions or limitations. The first time Eleanor brought hope to town, Maya wasn't prepared for the reception they received. Word had traveled through the small mountain community with the efficiency that only gossip networks could achieve. But the reality of seeing Eleanor Whitmore pushing a baby stroller down Main Street seemed to transform speculation into something approaching wonder. Mrs. Patterson from the bakery was the first to approach, her earlier disapproval apparently forgotten in the face of an actual baby to admire. "Eleanor Whitmore," she said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. "Is this the little one we've been hearing about?" "This is Hope," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying the unmistakable pride of a grandmother showing off her most precious treasure. "Hope Rodriguez Whitmore." Maya noticed the hyphenated name and felt her heart swell. Eleanor had quietly added her own surname to Hope's, creating an official link that announced to the world that this child belonged to both of them. Mrs. Patterson leaned over the stroller, her face softening as she took in Hope's alert dark eyes and perfect tiny features. "She's absolutely beautiful. Look at that hair and those eyes. She's going to be a heartbreaker." Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered around them. The hardware store owner, who had always nodded politely to Eleanor, now asked detailed questions about Hope's sleeping schedule. The librarian, who had known Eleanor for decades, marveled at how much the baby resembled her mother. The pharmacist offered unsolicited advice about infant care products with the enthusiasm of someone who rarely had opportunities to discuss such joyful topics. "You know," said Mrs. Henderson, "the woman who ran the local quilting circle. We've been working on something for the baby. A community project." She disappeared into her shop and returned with a bundle wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was the most beautiful baby blanket Maya had ever seen, clearly handmade with intricate stitching in soft pastels. But what made it truly special were the small embroidered signatures scattered across its surface. "Everyone in town contributed something," Mrs. Henderson explained. "A few stitches, a flower, their name. We wanted Hope to know she's welcomed here, that she's part of our community from the very beginning." Maya felt tears threatening as she examined the blanket more closely. Names she recognized from the grocery store, the post office, the diner where she and Eleanor occasionally had lunch. Even some names she didn't recognize, people who had contributed to this gesture of acceptance despite never having met her. "This is incredible," Maya whispered. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Mrs. Henderson replied. "Just know that this little one has a whole town full of honorary aunts and uncles who are invested in her happiness." Eleanor accepted the blanket with the dignity of someone who understood the significance of community acceptance. But Maya could see the emotion in her eyes. After decades of polite but distant interactions with her neighbors, she was being welcomed back into the heart of the town she had called home for so long. At the diner, their usual waitress brought a high chair without being asked and spent several minutes cooing over Hope while taking their order. The couple at the next table struck up a conversation about child-rearing that lasted through their entire meal. The teenage boy who bussed tables seemed particularly fascinated by Hope's tiny hands and kept finding excuses to walk past their booth. "It's like she's a celebrity," Maya observed as they prepared to leave. "Babies have that effect on people," Eldina replied, but Maya could see the deep satisfaction in her expression. "They remind us of what's possible, what's worth celebrating." On the drive home, Maya reflected on how dramatically their status in the community had shifted. Where once she had felt the weight of judgment and speculation, now she sensed genuine warmth and interest. Hope had somehow transformed them from objects of gossip into a family worthy of celebration. "Eleanor," Maya said as they turned onto the road leading to their cabin, "what changed? Why are people acting so differently now?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, considering the question. I think people were waiting to see what kind of story we were going to write. When they saw Hope, healthy and loved and clearly thriving, they understood that our story is one worth supporting. Back at the cabin, Maya spread the community blanket over Hope's crib, marveling at the dozens of small contributions that had created something beautiful and meaningful. Each signature represented someone who had taken time to participate in welcoming a child they had never met, simply because she belonged to people they cared about. "Look at this," Maya said, pointing to a corner of the blanket where someone had embroidered a small mountain scene with a tiny cabin nestled among pine trees. "Someone actually stitched our home." Eleanor leaned over to examine the delicate work. "That would be Mrs. Chen from the fabric store. She's always been an artist with thread." As Hope slept peacefully under her community-made blanket, Maya understood that they had achieved something rare and precious. They had created not just a family, but a place in the world where that family was recognized, accepted, and celebrated by the people around them. With spring's arrival came possibilities that Maya had never dared to imagine during those dark winter months when her future seemed defined entirely by limitations and loss. Eleanor suggested they start a garden together, not just for the practical benefits of fresh vegetables, but as a way to teach Hope about growth and patience and the satisfaction of nurturing living things. "Every child should know where food comes from," Eleanor explained as they stood on the cabin's front porch, surveying the area where snow was finally melting to reveal rich, dark soil beneath. "And every child should understand that good things take time to develop." Maya held Hope against her shoulder, the baby's alert eyes seeming to take in everything around her with the fascination of someone discovering the world for the first time. At 2 months old, Hope had developed into a remarkably content baby, sleeping well and smiling often, as if she understood that she was surrounded by people who would do anything to ensure her happiness. Eleanor had ordered seed catalogues over the winter, and their kitchen table was now covered with packets of heirloom varieties that represented both tradition and hope for the future. Tomatoes that had been grown by Eleanor's grandmother, beans that had sustained her family through difficult years, flowers that would attract beneficial insects while adding beauty to their practical efforts. "This packet of sunflower seeds came from plants I grew with Sarah," Eleanor said, holding up seeds that looked unremarkable but carried decades of family history. She was 8 years old, and she insisted on planting them in a perfect circle around the cabin. That summer, we were surrounded by flowers that stood taller than she was. Maya tried to picture a young Sarah running between giant sunflowers, her laughter echoing across the mountain meadow. The image brought both sadness for the woman she would never meet and gratitude for the legacy of love that had brought Hope into existence. "We'll plant them again," Maya said simply. Hope should grow up with Sarah's sunflowers. As they worked together to prepare the garden beds, Eleanor shared knowledge that had been passed down through generations of women who understood that growing food was both practical skill and spiritual practice. She showed Maya how to test soil composition by feeling its texture, how to judge proper spacing by understanding each plant's mature size, how to time plantings by reading natural signs rather than relying entirely on calendar dates. "Gardening teaches you patience," Eleanor explained, as they carefully planted tiny seeds that would take months to reach maturity. "It teaches you that some things can't be rushed, that the best results come from consistent care rather than dramatic intervention." Maya understood that Eleanor was talking about more than vegetables. The older woman was sharing philosophy that had guided her through decades of nurturing not just plants, but people. The same patience that produced excellent tomatoes had created the space for Maya to heal and grow into motherhood. Hope seemed to enjoy the outdoor work, settling contentedly in the portable crib Eleanor had placed in the shade while they worked. Her eyes followed their movements with the intense focus of someone studying important information. and she made small sounds that seemed to express approval of their activities. "Look at her watching us," Maya observed. "It's like she's already learning." "Children absorb more than we realize," Eleanor replied. "She's learning that work can be satisfying, that taking care of living things is important, that the people she loves collaborate instead of competing." As spring progressed, Maya began making tentative plans for the future that went beyond simple survival. She had been corresponding with a local college about completing her degree through distance learning, a possibility that would allow her to stay near Eleanor while building credentials for long-term career stability. "What would you study?" Eleanor asked one evening as they sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Early childhood education," Maya replied without hesitation. "I want to work with children, maybe teach preschool or kindergarten. Help other kids get strong foundations for learning." Eleanor's smile was radiant with approval and pride. "That's perfect. You have natural instincts for nurturing, and your experience overcoming challenges would make you understand children who need extra support." They had also begun discussing the practical arrangements that would allow Maya to eventually live independently while maintaining their close family connection. Eleanor had contacted a local contractor about adding a small apartment to the cabin, a space that would provide privacy for Maya and Hope while keeping them close enough for daily interaction and shared childcare. "I want you to be independent," Eleanor explained, "but I also want to be part of Hope's daily life. This seems like a solution that gives us both what we need." Maya looked at the garden they were creating together, at the cabin that had become home, at the sleeping baby who represented everything beautiful about second chances and chosen family. Spring had brought more than warmer weather and longer days. It had brought the promise that growth was possible, that patient care could transform even the most challenging circumstances into something beautiful and sustainable. "Eleanor," Maya said softly, "thank you for teaching me that families can be created through love instead of just inherited through blood." "Thank you," Eleanor replied, "for giving me the chance to be the grandmother I always dreamed of being." The conversation about the cabin's future began quietly, as many life-changing discussions do, with Eleanor making an observation that seemed casual but carried profound implications. "I've been thinking about what happens to this place when I'm gone," Eleanor said one morning as they sat at the kitchen table, Hope gurgling contentedly in her high chair while attempting to grasp pieces of soft fruit. Maya's hands stilled on her coffee cup. At 73, Eleanor was healthy and vibrant, but Maya understood that planning for the future was simply practical wisdom rather than morbid preoccupation. "What do you mean?" Eleanor pulled out papers she had been working on with quiet determination for several weeks. "I mean, I want to make sure this cabin always belongs to people who understand what it represents. People who will love it and care for it the way it deserves." The documents spread across the table were more complex than Maya had expected. Property deeds, legal agreements, financial planning papers that spoke of careful consideration and professional consultation. "Eleanor, what is all this?" "I want to transfer ownership of the cabin and the land to you," Eleanor said simply. "Officially, legally, permanently. I want this to be Hope's inheritance, her foundation for whatever life she chooses to build." Maya felt the world tilt slightly. "I can't accept that. This place is your home, your life's work. It should stay in your family." "You are my family," Eleanor replied with gentle firmness. "You and Hope are the most important family I've ever had. This cabin needs to belong to people who will fill it with love and laughter and the sound of children growing up safely." Eleanor's lawyer had prepared comprehensive documents that addressed every possible concern. Maya would become the legal owner, but Eleanor would retain lifetime residence rights and decision-making authority for as long as she was able to exercise it. The arrangement protected Eleanor's security while ensuring the property's future, but Eleanor, the financial implications. "This place must be worth—" "Money isn't the point," Eleanor interrupted. "Legacy is the point. making sure that what Thomas and I built here continues to serve its purpose long after we're both gone. Maya studied the papers, trying to understand the magnitude of what was being offered. The cabin and its surrounding land represented not just financial security, but generational stability for Hope, a place where she could always return, always belong, regardless of what other changes life might bring. There's one condition, Eleanor continued, her tone becoming more formal. If you accept this gift, you have to promise me that this place will always be a sanctuary for people who need help. I don't care if it's pregnant women or families in crisis, or just someone who needs a safe place to heal. Promise me this cabin will always serve people who need second chances. Maya felt tears welling up as she understood the deeper meaning behind Eleanor's generosity. This wasn't just about providing security for Maya and Hope. It was about creating a permanent legacy of the kind of radical kindness that had saved Maya's life. I promise, Maya whispered. I promise this place will always be a home for people who need one. Eleanor's smile was radiant with satisfaction and relief. Then we have a deal. The signing ceremony took place on a perfect spring afternoon, with Hope sitting on Maya's lap and reaching for the pen, as if she wanted to participate in this momentous occasion. Eleanor's lawyer served as witness, along with Margaret Chen, who had become like family during their months of shared experience. This feels too big, Maya said, as she signed her name to documents that would change everything. I don't know how to thank you. Live well, Eleanor replied simply. Raise Hope to be kind and strong and generous. Help other people when they need it. That's all the thanks I need. As they celebrated with a dinner featuring vegetables from their garden and cake from the town bakery, Maya marveled at how completely her life had been transformed. 8 months ago, she had been a homeless pregnant woman, facing an uncertain future alone. Now she was a mother, a homeowner, and part of a family that had chosen each other across the barriers of age, background, and circumstance. What should we do first? Maya asked as they sat on the front porch, watching Hope explore the texture of grass with intense concentration. We should start planning that apartment addition, Eleanor replied. And maybe think about expanding the garden. If this place is going to be a sanctuary for people who need help, we should be prepared to feed more than just ourselves. Maya looked around at the cabin that was now legally hers, but would always feel like Eleanor's gift of love and faith. The mountains rose majestically in the distance, unchanged by human dramas, but witness to the stories that unfolded in their shadow. Somewhere in those peaks, spring was revealing new growth that had been waiting all winter for the right moment to emerge. Eleanor, Maya said softly, I love you. Both Hope and I love you more than words can express. And I love you both more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone, Eleanor replied. You gave me back my purpose, my joy, my reason for getting up in the morning. You made me remember who I was always meant to be. Hope's first birthday party was everything Maya had dreamed of during those uncertain months of pregnancy, but had never dared to believe might actually happen. The cabin's living room was decorated with handmade banners created by Eleanor's steady hands, and the kitchen table groaned under the weight of contributions from their extended community. Emily, Mrs. Patterson, had provided a cake decorated with delicate sugar flowers that must have taken hours to create. The quilting circle had made a special birthday quilt, featuring appliqued images of mountains, pine trees, and a small cabin that looked remarkably like their home. Dr. Harrison and his wife had driven up from town with a collection of children's books that would last Hope well into her elementary school years, but the most precious gift came from Eleanor herself. A wooden rocking horse, carved by her own hands during the long winter evenings when Hope slept peacefully and Maya studied for her college courses by lamplight. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every surface sanded smooth and finished to a lustrous glow that invited touching. Thomas would have loved making this for his granddaughter, Eleanor said, as she presented the gift to Hope. who immediately reached for the horse's carved mane with the determined focus of a 1-year-old who had strong opinions about what deserved investigation. Maya watched, Hope explore her new toy, and marveled at how completely normal this felt. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined sitting in a room full of people who cared about her daughter's happiness. Couldn't have pictured herself as someone whose life had stabilized enough to host celebrations and plan for the future. The apartment addition to the cabin was nearly complete, providing Maya and Hope with their own space, while keeping them close enough to Eleanor for daily interaction. Maya had finished her first year of college courses with grades that surprised even her, discovering that academic work felt different when it was connected to clear purpose and supported by people who believed in her potential. "Tell us about your summer plans." "Margaret," Jen requested as the party wound down and the adults settled into comfortable conversation while Hope napped in Eleanor's arms. "I'm going to start working at the community center 3 days a week," Maya replied, her voice carrying pride and excitement. "Helping with their new early childhood program. It's perfect experience for my education degree, and it means Hope can come with me to work." Eleanor's face glowed with satisfaction as she listened to Maya's plans. The transformation from desperate young woman to confident mother and student had been remarkable to witness, but Eleanor understood that Maya's success came from her own strength and determination. Eleanor had simply provided the safe space necessary for that strength to emerge. "And what about the sanctuary program?" Dr. Harrison asked. "Are you still planning to formalize that?" Maya and Eleanor exchanged glances. They had been working with social services to establish the cabin as an official resource for women facing crisis pregnancies, a place where they could receive support without judgment while making decisions about their futures. "We've had 2 families stay with us since winter," Eleanor replied. "Both situations worked out well. I think we're ready to make it more official." Maya nodded agreement. "We want to be careful about it. Make sure we can provide real help instead of just good intentions. But yes, I think it's time to honor the promise I made when Eleanor gave me this place." As the celebration continued into the evening, Maya took a photograph of Hope sitting in Eleanor's lap, both of them laughing at something only they found amusing. The image captured everything beautiful about their unconventional family: the joy, the security, the deep affection that had grown from crisis into something permanent and life-sustaining. Later, after the guests had departed and Hope was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Maya and Eleanor sat on the front porch watching stars emerge in the mountain sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Maya asked quietly. "Taking in a stranger who turned your quiet life upside down?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I regret that it took me so long to understand what really mattered. I regret the years I spent hiding from life instead of engaging with it." "But regret taking you in?" "Never. Not for a single moment." Maya reached for Eleanor's hand, their fingers interlacing with the easy familiarity of people who had shared both crisis and joy. "I keep thinking about all the things that had to go wrong for everything to go right," Maya mused. "Derek leaving me, losing my apartment, ending up homeless in a snowstorm. If any of those things had happened differently, I never would have found you." "Maybe that's how grace works," Eleanor replied thoughtfully. "Maybe the worst things that happen to us sometimes lead us to the best things we never knew we needed." Inside the cabin, Hope stirred in her sleep, making the small sounds of a child who was dreaming peacefully in a place where she was completely safe and unconditionally loved. The sound carried through the open window like a benediction, a reminder that some stories do have the endings their characters deserve. 5 years had passed since that snowy night when Maya collapsed outside Eleanor's cabin, and the woman who now sat at the kitchen table writing in her journal bore little resemblance to the desperate, frightened girl who had once been too proud to ask for help. Maya had graduated with her education degree, was working full-time as a kindergarten teacher, and had become a respected voice in their community's efforts to support families in crisis. Eleanor, now 78 but still vital and engaged, had returned to midwifery on a limited basis, working with the county health department to provide care for women in remote mountain communities. Her gentle competence and decades of experience had made her a treasure among younger medical professionals who sought her guidance on complex cases, but it was their work together that had truly transformed both their lives and their community. The cabin had officially become Hope House, a registered non-profit organization that provided temporary housing and support services for pregnant women facing difficult circumstances. In 5 years, they had helped 37 women navigate crisis pregnancies, and 35 healthy babies had been born to mothers who might otherwise have faced their challenges alone. Eleanor's journal, which she had begun keeping the day Maya arrived, had become a record of transformation that amazed even her. The entries from those early days showed a woman struggling with grief and isolation. The recent entries revealed someone who had found profound purpose in service to others. "Maya stopped by today with wonderful news," Eleanor wrote in her careful handwriting. "The state legislature is considering a bill that would provide funding for programs like ours. Maya will testify about the importance of supportive housing for women in crisis. I could not be more proud of the advocate she has become." Hope, now a confident 5-year-old with her mother's dark eyes and Eleanor's practical wisdom, had grown up understanding that their home was a special place where people came when they needed help. She had learned to be gentle with the women who stayed with them, had absorbed lessons about kindness and service that most children never had the opportunity to experience firsthand. "Mama Eleanor," Hope said, using the name she had created for the woman who functioned as her grandmother in every way that mattered. "When I grow up, can I help take care of people too?" Eleanor set down her pen and pulled Hope onto her lap, marveling as always at how naturally this child had learned to love without conditions or limitations. "Of course you can, sweetheart. But you know what? You're already helping take care of people. Every time you share your toys with the babies who visit us, every time you help me make cookies for someone who's feeling sad, you're taking care of people." Hope considered this seriously, as she did most things. "Is that why Mama Maya teaches little kids? Because teaching is taking care of people?" "That's exactly right. Your mama teaches children because she understands how important it is for every child to feel safe and loved and capable of learning." As if summoned by their conversation, Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face glowing with excitement and something that looked like nervous anticipation. "I have news," she announced, settling into her chair at the table, where so many important conversations had taken place over the years. Eleanor and Hope looked at her expectantly. "I've been offered a position with the state education department, developing programs for early childhood education in rural communities." Maya's voice carried pride, mixed with uncertainty. "It would mean traveling some, but I could work from home most of the time." Eleanor's smile was immediate and radiant. "That's wonderful news. You'll be able to help children all across the state instead of just in our district." "But there's something else," Maya continued, her tone becoming more serious. "I've also been contacted by a publisher who wants me to write a book about our experience here, about how communities can support women and children in crisis." Eleanor felt her breath catch. The idea of their story reaching a wider audience, possibly inspiring similar programs in other communities, filled her with a sense of completion she hadn't expected. "What kind of book?" she asked. "A combination of memoir and practical guide. Our story, but also information about how other communities could create similar programs. The publisher thinks it could make a real difference." Eleanor looked around the kitchen where this conversation was taking place. The same room where she had first offered Maya shelter and where they had made the decision to formalize their family. Everything had grown from that initial choice to extend kindness without conditions. "I think," Eleanor said slowly, "that this is exactly what should happen next." Your story, our story, needs to be shared. Not because it's unique, but because it shows what's possible when people choose love over fear. Hope wiggled off Eleanor's lap and ran to retrieve something from the living room. She returned carrying the framed photograph from her first birthday party, the image that captured the joy and security that had defined her early years. "Will you put this picture in the book?" Hope asked, holding up the photograph that showed 3 generations of chosen family celebrating together. Maya took the picture and studied it, seeing in their faces the evidence of transformation that had seemed impossible just a few years earlier. Eleanor's expression showed peace and purpose. Maya's own face reflected confidence and hope. And Hope herself embodied the security that comes from being unconditionally loved. "Yes," Maya said softly. "I think this picture tells the whole story.